Good afternoon everybody, Michael here for Tactica Imperialis with another 40k tactics video. Today we are talking more Tau. You may have seen my video a couple of days ago in which I did a Tactica of fighting against Tau. Well, today I'm doing a video for fighting as Tau. Going to redress the balance and conclude my little series of Tau stuff that I began with Codex analysis. So, I'm going to go through it the same way I went through my analysis video, my Tactica video for fighting against Tau. So I'm going to go through army lists, I'm going to go through deployment, and I'm going to go through during the game. So, first thing is with your army list, of course, and the first thing you should do is pick your troops. Assume we're playing Battleforged. It makes my life easier. Assume Battleforged. So your first choice is Fire Warriors. No questions asked. Pretty much every time you need 2 squads of Fire Warriors. They are the better troop choice in almost every aspect. The only thing they're worse at is with their weapon skill, but they have the same number of attacks anyway. And Kroot in melee still suck. The only use I can see for Kroot is outflanking and coming on and being a nuisance, but for your main troops you need Fire Warriors. Do you take transports? Probably not, because you're sacrificing firepower. Devilfishes have no fire points. But if you need to be mobile, then there are worse things than having Devilfishes. Then you need to pick your HQ, and your HQ can be a commander, an ethereal, or a cadre fireblade, or a named character. I would recommend almost every time you pick a commander. Commanders are the most solid, the most rounded, and the most versatile troop choice. HQ choice, sorry. And they will do the most things for you. You need a lot of weapons and a lot of buffs, because Tau stuff is not amazing, actually. Apart from the weapons, they're a bit They're just guardsmen, really, if not worse. So you need them to be powerful in what they do, and the best way to do that is good weapons and good buffs. What you give to your commander is completely dependent on your personal taste and your opponent. If you love plasma weapons, take plasma. If your opponent runs lots of tanks, take melter. Maybe you take 1 plasma, 1 melter. That way you satisfy both parties. But make sure whatever you pick, it's got to be useful or something that you really like. Don't go full spam on weapons, you can only fire 2. And then you can think about what buffs you want to give out. Signature systems, or what are they? Support systems, that's it. Signature systems are okay. I mean, some of them are quite useful. Iridium Armor, for example, is very, very useful. The Neuroweb Jammer could be quite funny, and the Omega Gauntlet can be hilarious. But sometimes you might want Skyfire, sometimes you might want buffs for precision shots if you want to snipe out characters. For example, if you have Plasma or Melter. Perhaps you might want Interceptor. I don't see why you'd use Interceptor, but you might. It's just whatever your opponent uses, you might want to use a counter for. Don't tailor, that's dick move, but think carefully about what you need. If you don't know what you're going up against, pick a solid build. One build is the Buff Commander, where you take no weapons and just loads of buffs. It's evil. Don't do it. It's sweaty, as Warwick would put it. It's very sweaty, it's very cheesy, it's very evil. As your secondary HQ, if you have the points, take an Ethereal or take a Fireblade. Generally, I prefer Ethereals. They have more versatility, but they die faster than a Grot who's about to get stood on. They die incredibly quickly if you're not careful. You need shield drones on them, you need units around them. Well, you have units around them anyway to deal with the buffs, but you need to protect an Ethereal. Fireblades are less useful, but more reliable. They'll always do a good job, because an extra shot on Fire Warriors is never anything to sniff at. If you're firing at Guardsmen, 20 shots as opposed to 10, or 30 shots if you get to half range, ow! Seriously, ow! That hurts as a Guard player, especially if you've got Marker Lights. So Fireblades are good, but I think Ethereals are slightly better. If you want a named character, that's up to you. I love Darkstrider. I think he's a great support HQ. I love Farsight. I love his fluff. I'm not dead sold on Shadow Sun and the ethereal characters, but I really like those two. You also need Marker Lights. Never, ever, ever leave home without Marker Lights. Be it from Pathfinders, Network Marker Lights, Team Leaders, whatever. You must have Marker Lights. It's the only absolute must is you take Marker Lights. Tau BS is 3. That's Pants. That's Guardsman. That's Eldar. Is it even as good as Eldar? I think Eldar, at least in part, are BS4. BS3 is naff. Particularly if you haven't got a load of shots. Because Firewalls only pack probably 1 shot each most of the time. So, Marker Lights are key to buffing BS and to deal with Ignore's cover. Shrouded getting you down, stealth being a pain in the arse, stealth and shrouded stealth suits, I'm looking at you. Ignores cover, problem solved. Ish, you start to get through armour. You can also use it for seeker missiles, which is always useful. I mean, a strength 8 AP3 missile to the face is very handy. But I generally use it for the BS buffs if you're going to kill something, and ignores cover if something is getting close to you and being a pain in your rear end. You need marker lights. I prefer Pathfinders as your best source because you can get loads of them, but sometimes you might want to equip your Pathfinders in another way. Then it comes down to you. What do you like? For me, as a Tau player, I'm not a Tau player, but if I did play Tau, I take battle suits, I take stealth suits, I take a hammerhead, I take Pathfinders, I'd probably take a Piranha for some anti-tank, and I'd take a flyer. I take a bit of everything. I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to armor list. I will play the fluff, and a Hunter Cadre, is it a Cadre? I pronounce it a Hunter Cadre, would use Pathfinders for scouting. The Montcar, you'd use stealth, perhaps for Kauyon, and Crisis for Montcar. You'd have a Hammerhead to deal with tanks. You'd have Piranhas to deal with tanks, or to get around and be a pain. You'd have maybe some auxiliaries. I know auxiliaries suck, but I'm very much a fluffy purist. But obviously, if you want to play more competitively, look at what's going on YouTube, look at what's going on in the meta, look at Bell of Lost Souls, look at Daka, look at what's working. That's a little bit of a cheesy way. I'd still go with what you like, but if you want to win competitively, sometimes it helps to get some help. So that's army list. Make sure you have some anti-tank as well. That's just the last point, you need anti-tank. That's your army list. So then it comes to a mission. As I sort of did, you've got that deployment, and that deployment, or possibly that deployment. If you get that deployment, so I think it's called Pitch Battle, where you've got long table edges are yours, make sure you spread out a bit. Obviously, don't clump, because otherwise you leave yourself open to flanks, you leave yourself open to deep strikes, you leave yourself open to units getting up in your face very, very quickly. Plus, you compromise your arcs of fire because you've got other units in the way. That's about it, really. Make sure your tanks can't present their rear armour. Make sure if they're hammerheads, they present their front. Keep your crisis suits out of sight just for a turn 2 move, or a turn 1 move and then a hop back, because otherwise they are going to be prime targets. If you're playing that way, similar things apply, but you have less space, going across your deployment zone. So you need to think carefully about where everything is. You have more depth inwards, as in you can deploy over more space, but you have less width. So you might have to compromise a few arcs of fire, or hide a few key units such as Pathfinders and Crisis Suits, but you'd be doing that anyway. If you get the corners, which is, I think it's Dawn of War, it might be Hammer of Anvil, same idea as with the short board edges deployment. Make sure your key units are covered. Don't compromise your arcs of fire if you can. If you can get your Hammerhead on a hill or your Pathfinders in a building, do it. It's pretty similar to the anti-Tau video. Make sure that your chaff units, if you have any, are front and centre. Your key units are in a good position but not exposed. Your buff units are out of sight. Your useful units, like shooter units, are in good LOS positions. Make sure your tanks are, depending on their range, either front armor presented or hidden back. Whatever. Just do what needs to be done that you think will make your army look the best. And then it comes to the game. Now, I mentioned a lot about board control in the anti-Tau video and how an opponent needs board control to beat Tau. It's true. If Tau get board control, they can mess you up. So, as a Tau player, the onus is on you to not just stand there. It sounds dumb, but if you advance 6 inches, you've got the first turn. You can let them come to you for first turn. If they take first turn, fine. Let them come to you for a turn. They've got to move. You can then just blast them on your turn 1, because you don't have to move, and then you can start putting the pressure on. If you've got fast units like Piranhas, get them on the move. Vespids, move. Crisis Suits, move. Stealth Suits, get them to cover. Get them moving. Get on the board. Don't spread yourself too thin, but make sure you can at least get on the board where your opponent hasn't got anywhere to hide. Advancing 2 Fire Warrior teams, one covering the other, can be a real problem, because your opponent will basically have to think, how am I going to kill all these pull shots that are going to be in my face next turn? And the answer is he has to focus fire on them, meaning that your Crisis Suits, which might just be behind them, actually survive and come in and they wreck face. It's hard to get board control because Tau forces are quite small, but if you can get at least out of your deployment zone and up a bit, as odd as it sounds, you can then start falling back, because your opponent will have to run to catch up. Because, yeah, assault moves are fine, but you've got Overwatch and supporting fire. As the game wears on, you should start seeing your opponent get whittled down. You should. Not many armies can take a barrage of shooting from town and come out of it alive. Marines and Terminators are the possible only exceptions, but their toughness 4. They're going to fail some arm saves eventually. Monstrous creatures, no problem. Tanks are your big issue. So you need Melters, you need Fusion, which is the same thing actually. You need Hammerheads. I think Hammerheads are the best tank killers in the Tau Codex, bar none. Heavy Rail Rifles, even regular Rail Rifles are still strength 6, so they're quite useful on AP1 if they can get into a tank. If you have EMP grenades, this is an odd one. I like EMP grenades, but they're 2 points a model, and that's a little bit steep for me. I think Haywire would be good if it was 1 point, but EMP being 2, it's a little expensive. Especially on a 10-man firearm team, you're spending another 20 points again. That's 2 more guys you could have bought. And then as the game wears on, as I say, your opponent gets whittled down. It will be a little bit of a slog, but by turn 3, you should be in a position where you've got good, solid units, and you can start pushing up. You can go for that Montcat killing blow. You can be patient and then wallop. That's what you've got to do. Patient for a couple turns, maybe get a little bit of board presence, and then whack. Once it comes to turn 3 or 4, whack. That's the best way I can put it. I think that's the best way to play it as Tau. Patience, smack. Cow Yon, I think is the phrase. Patient hunter. Lure them in, smack. I'm going to stop punching now. Right. As you get to endgame, you need to make sure you have objectives. Objective grabbing is a real issue. So this is where if you have crew, these are quite useful. Outflanking crew, disc-striking Vespids and Crisis and Stealth. That might just get you a few objectives, particularly in attack objective games, that can turn it around. If you sit too patiently, your opponent can build up a lead and you can't make it up without tabling, which is hard. And that's about it, really. As I say, I'm not a Tau player. I haven't played a game as Tau. This is just general thoughts after doing the codex. So not everything will be valid here. Not everything will be right. I have made mistakes. I'm sure of it. So let me know in the comments what you think. The last thing is the Riptide. To Riptide or not to Riptide? Riptides are very good, but they tar pit really badly. They get tar pitted so easily by anything that's fearless or has a high leadership or pseudo-fearless, such as Summer Execution and They Shall Know No Fear, can really tar pit a Riptide. You need to keep your Riptide mobile and don't overspend on it. If you're playing at 1500, if your Riptide goes over 220, you've overdone it, I say. If you're playing 2000, then you have a bit more leeway. But Riptides are good. I would recommend Burst if you're playing infantry, Ion for everything else. Because AP2 versus AP4 rending. I would often be Nova charging if I wanted the jump or I wanted the shield. Depends on the situation. Probably shield first turn, jump pack second turn, and jump pack most turns after. Unless you need an overcharge weapon. Up to you. So, that concludes this video. I hope you found it useful. I admit it could be a little bit naff, but I've done a bit. I think that can help you. So, thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, let me know and I will respond. Thank you for watching. My name is Michael, and I will see you again.